Yeah. We did it. We're live. Hooray.
Yay.
Hey, everybody. Oh,
Hey,
I'm not even looking at the comments. Okay. All right. I think the comments going on the background. Yeah, I think I will. How's everybody doing?
Awesome.
Yeah.
How are you?
Wonderful. Good.
It's my
Good.
my
Yeah.
first weekly space hangout of the season, all the way like we're almost done with the season.
No. No, I feel like we did another one with you.
I haven't done one since before the summer,
Hmm.
but never fear, you have me again next week and then another time in December.
Right.
So
You're gonna
Nancy's
make up
cramming
for it.
me in and for good measure.
Yeah. How's things going with the, trying to keep the museum rolling?
Yeah, it's a challenge. We're still kind of emerging from the pandemic. We're facing many of the same staffing difficulties that lots of small businesses are facing, but we don't have any money, so that makes it harder to do what the right thing to do is, which is to pay people more.
Right.
And so trying to navigate how to do what you should do without the
Mhm.
resources to be able to make good on that is certainly a
Yeah.
challenge. But we're doing some neat stuff, and it's good to be back in action. I enjoy having people in the building again after so long. That
Yeah.
energy is definitely something you want to build on.
It's definitely been a concern for me too. Like, I think I've doubled the amount that I pay everybody from when the pandemic started to now, just because inflation is going up, and so I just keep giving everybody surprise raises because it's, and I just walk that fine line. Like, however much I can afford, then I pay salaries and just try to sort of time everything as perfectly as I can, because it's a rough time right now for everybody involved, for both people who run businesses and people who are trying to work and provide for their families. It's a tough time, and I think it's the least we can do to try to smooth out the economy, the world's economy, which is almost impossible right now.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can sail through the winter without another sort of big surge.
Yeah.
Which seems like it's happening even in places that are pretty vaccinated. So we'll just kind of do what we can to not do any more damage.
Yeah, I was mentioning just before the show in fairly colorful language just how sick I am of this whole situation. And yet, this is the trick. Like, doesn't care about how sick of it we are. It's just relentless, and so we just got to keep being disciplined. So soldier on.
Welcome to weekly economic news and general sadness.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey.
All right, we've
I'm
hit
your
the
host, Grumpy.
all right, well, I'm gonna start things up. So let's get cracking.
Yay!
Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Weekly Space Hangout for Wednesday, November 24th, 2021. I'm Roger Kane, publisher of University. This week, we're going to be talking about all the cool stuff you can see in space. James Webb had an incident. NASA's launched DART, and a few other stories that we're looking at. Joining us this week, we've got Dr. Morgan. Morgan.
Hey, Fraser. It's good to be here.
Welcome back. Now, you claim, and I think you're lying, that this is the first time you've been on the show in this season since September.
I think that's true. I did the Conquest con thing.
Hangout-a-thon. Yeah.
Well, the one before that one. I think that was since the summer, but I think that's the only time that I've been here. So it feels really good to be back, and it's like a welcoming old friend to know that JWST is having trouble. I feel like all is right with the world, and I am here for it.
The funniest thing, well, we'll talk about this actually. We'll wait and we'll talk about this when we actually get to that segment. So I'll hold my my hilarious anecdote about James Webb. We've also got Pam Hoffman. Hey, Pam.
Hi, Fraser. Glad to be back.
Did you catch the lunar eclipse?
Too much crud in the air.
Yeah.
Marine layer. I don't know what. It was bad.
Yeah, and we had clouds. It wasn't great. My wife was a little out of town and she saw it, but it was too cold. So she went outside, took a terrible picture, and because it was blurry, and she took it very quickly and busted back inside because she just was sick of it. So, yeah. But it was a partial anyway, although pretty good partial. Like, it was.
Yeah, wasn't it better than we kind of thought it was going to be? Partials are kind of not great usually, but
yeah. Well, it was. Oh man, umbral, right? It was an umbral one, so it went through the shadow as opposed to penumbral, where it goes through the little part around the outside. And I should have clarified. If you told me there was a penumbral lunar eclipse going on behind me, I wouldn't even turn around to look at it. If there's an umbral partial lunar eclipse, they're a treat. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Got it.
Fantastic. Well, great to have you back. All right, we're going to get on with our guest in a second, but before we do, I want to give a huge thank you, as always, to our good friends of the Weekly Space Hangout crew. They are our friends, our fans, our executive producers. They call the shots. We do what they say. And if you want to have that kind of just overwhelming executive power over me and all of my co-hosts, all you have to do is join the Weekly Space Hangout crew. And I'm not like kidding here. Like if there's some guest anywhere out there, you want to talk to someone who works at SpaceX, you want us to interview someone at the European Space Agency, astronauts involved with any mission, all you have to do is join the crew, and then they give you your executive producer credentials, all the instructions on how you can invite anyone you want on the show. And then you just send out an email and say, hey, I'm an executive producer of the Weekly Space Hangout. Would you like to come and have an interview with us? Almost always people say yes. So this is a way to be a mover and a shaker in the space industry. Go to wshcrew.space to sign up and get more information. All right, let's get on with this week's special guest. We've got Ian Lauer. Hey, Ian.
Hey, Fraser. What's up, man?
Good. It's so many things, which we'll talk about in a second. But before we get into that, who are you? What do you do?
My name's Ian Lauer. I'm an astrophotographer. I guess self-proclaimed adventure astronomer because I go out and explore not only here on planet Earth, but I also explore outer space with my photos.
Right. You actually have a background in astronomy.
Yeah, I went to Humboldt State University up in Northern California, and I got my degree in physics and astronomy.
Yeah. So I feel like you can truly appreciate the scientific grandeur of what it is that you're looking at and taking pictures of.
Oh yeah, definitely, and it also helps when I'm, doing like stargazing presentations and things like that. I can kind of go into a little bit more detail to answer a couple of those questions that people have.
Yeah, you're one of those rare, like astronomers who can also find their way around the night sky.
That's
looking at you, Morgan.
Oh, rude!
Shots fired.
No, Morgan probably could find Andromeda in the sky, right?
I can.
You named one of the like 3 or 4 that I could find.
Oh, good. Okay, all right, perfect, nice. It is funny though how many you talk to astronomers and they're like, look,
proudly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the data. Yeah, I have no idea where M51 is. Just
right.
He's sad though.
That amazed me when I was in school. Like I was like excited to learn about how to navigate the night sky, and they had like 2 class sessions about like here's the constellations and here's what Messier objects are. Okay, now moving on to mechanics, and I was like, oh, that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Just punch in these coordinates into your telescope software, and you will have pictures of the thing you wanted to see. Yeah. All right. So, but you, I guess, most recently have been taking a ton of pictures of the night sky. Tell us about your setup and how you're doing astrophotography these days.
Yeah. So, well, these days I'm actually using a DSLR camera, like a Sony or a Fuji or Canon type camera. I've mostly been doing wide field recently. Milky Way photography, nightscapes is what people would normally call them. But I definitely, I'm starting to get back into using deep space equipment, right? And what I've really been doing is teaching workshops and teaching people how to get into astrophotography, right? So, for example, like the question I always get is like, how do you do this? What do I do? What kind of equipment do I need? Because everyone thinks you got to have a big telescope, you got to have all the special equipment, computers and software. I'm like, no, man, if you have a DSLR camera, a nice lens, like a wide field lens and a tripod, you can be doing astrophotography. It's that easy.
All right. So then let's get into it. So let's talk about that shopping list of basic gear that a person would require to do pretty great astrophotography.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, get the camera, the wide lens, and the tripod. So the camera, I mean, like mirrorless is like what's with a hot thing right now, and those are like the Sony Alpha cameras or the Fuji X series cameras, things like that. And with that, you're good to go. Even like older cameras, like a Canon Rebel or something like that. Those are perfect.
So like a Sony mirrorless or what is one of those run?
So Sony cameras can get up to like you're looking to spend between like $2,000 and $4,000 for a Sony body, which is a lot. But again, the used market is incredible, where you can get like a DSLR camera for like $500, right?
Yeah, you mentioned the Rebel. I mean, you can pick up a used Rebel for even less. I mean, that's a 10-year-old DSLR camera. You can get pretty cheap.
Exactly.
Or the T5. I'm not even sure where Canon's at with their T series.
What does that DSLR really mean? Is that, I don't know what that means. I always hear that, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah, so it's like a digital single lens reflex camera. Essentially, it's like if you ever see someone who's like doing a live stream or almost like that. So that would be like a phone camera, right? Which actually, I would say these phone cameras are almost as good as like some of those older Canon cameras or Nikon cameras, because like
I went out and shot something and just held it and put it online, and everybody's like, "You did that by hand?" I was like, "Yeah, it was."
I love it. I gotta tell you, like there are a lot of photographers who aren't too keen about like phone cameras getting better and better. Man, I gotta say, I am so stoked that these are getting better, because like I don't want to lug around all this equipment and go out. If I can have all of that on this phone here, oh my gosh!
My Pixel has an astrophotography mode, and so as long as it's on a tripod and it's sitting really stable, it'll shift over at nighttime into this astrophotography mode, and I can take pictures of the Milky Way or pictures of various structures in the night sky. It's kind of amazing. Exactly. Okay, so you need the DSLR, and I think the key to that, right, is like you're going to use this camera for everything else as well. Like it's not just you're buying a special piece of equipment just for astronomy. You're buying something that is just your go-to camera for everything.
Right, exactly. So it's not just astrophotography, but it's a camera, right? That's all it is. It's just a camera. And the next step after the camera, which I would say is one of the most important parts, is the lens. Because you want to capture all of the Milky Way, right? So you use a wide field lens, and it has to have what they call a fast focal ratio. So like an f2.8, basically just like a wide open aperture to let in all of that light.
So why do you want that wider lens?
So when you have a wider lens, one, you can pick up more of the Milky Way, but also you want to let it. So astrophotography, like the name of the game, is light gathering power, right? You want to get in as much light as possible before you start seeing those stars start to move in your shot, because you're taking these long exposures, right? You're not just doing like a quick phone shot, which is like, 1/60th of a second. These are like 10, 15, 20-second exposures. And as we all know here, that the stars in the night sky from Earth move. I always gotta clarify that. Everyone's like, well.
wait. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why it's important.
The stars orbit around the Earth on their crystal sphere.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. In the firmament or whatever they call
exactly.
it.
Yeah. Okay. So you get the wide angle. You got the wide angle lens.
Aperture fever too. Like when you have telescope, you want more and more light, and they call it aperture fever. Is that a similar thing with photographers, or no?
Not so much, because each one is just a tool. Again, aperture fever is because our eyes refresh at like 1/60th a second, versus cameras, you could just leave the shutter open for as long as you want.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
And so then you're mentioning a stable tripod.
Of course, yeah, because you're taking those long exposures. Any shake, you're going to blur your whole photo.
So then if you take things to the next level, so here's where I have an issue with you. Is a tripod is great, but you are going to get that star trailing. So how can you make your images better with that same setup?
With that same setup, you can do what's called stacking, right? You can stack your photos. And essentially what that means is you take a photo, right? And then you take another photo, and then you take another photo. And you essentially are stacking all of those photos together of the Milky Way to get a nice, beautiful, detailed image where you get all this nice, awesome dust lanes and just everything nice and tack sharp. You got to use software for that, but one of the best tools you can get is once you have your DSLR camera, your next step, right up, if you think of it as like a ladder that you're climbing up in astrophotography, you got your camera, DSLR, tripod, and lens. The next level is getting a tracker, right? And essentially what a tracker does is you point your camera in a section of the sky, you turn it on, and it follows the stars as they move across the night sky. Very, very, very awesome tool.
And what does one of those run? Is it like attached to a tripod, or is it a tripod all on its own?
So it's essentially just it's essentially just a motor, right? So you attach it to your tripod, and then you put your camera on it, and they run. I mean, you could get ones that are like, I think the Move Shoot Move is one of the most inexpensive ones, like around $100. The one that I use is the Skywatcher Star Adventure, which is about $400. And this thing, it is seriously a game changer when it comes to Milky Way astrophotography.
And so now when you are bolting on this tracker, essentially it's tilted at the same axis as the Earth, and it's tracking the rotation. How much longer of an exposure can you now do with this tracking assistance?
So the beautiful thing is you can do as long as you want, as long as your what they call polar alignment, which is just like you were saying, aligning it so tracks perfectly. You can do it as long as you want. Now, if you use a wide lens, right, even if there's like imperfections, you can still get nice tracking. Because it's so wide, you won't see those imperfections. I've had friends do 15, 20-minute exposures, which is so insane to me. Yeah. And then if you go with a longer focal length, essentially just going deeper, right, looking quote unquote further, more magnification, you can get 2, 3, 4-minute exposures and still have nice crisp stars.
Well, I mean, my experience with astrophotography with a higher power telescope, you get to a point where the exposures are too long. There's too much light. Things are starting to blow out. So do you get to that point with the wider field of view, or even, where there's kind of like an ideal length and you just rather take a bunch of shorter exposures and then stack them up?
I would say it's a signal to noise ratio is essentially what you're like battling, right? You want to get in as much detail as possible while trying to weed out all of the noise, whether it's like air glow or
Starlink.
Starlink, oh yes, and all that stuff. So I mean, there is a point where it's like you're kind of going overboard with these like 15-minute exposures. Usually for me, if I'm doing a nice wide field shot of the Milky Way and I want to do tracked one, I'll do 2 minutes, and that's like a nice sweet spot for me.
So once you've got a tracker, though, you could put a higher millimeter lens on it, though, couldn't you? Like you could put a 60 millimeter or 100 millimeter lens. Like you can start going telephoto and turn it into a little telescope, right?
Exactly. That's the beauty of these trackers, right? It's like, okay, I've got this wide lens and I'm liking this nice photo of the Milky Way, but there's a region of the Milky Way that I'm kind of interested in, right? Maybe it's the core of the Milky Way. Let's go a little deeper. And so you switch out your wide lens. Maybe you put on a 60, 80, around that range millimeter lens. You take another photo and you're like, wow, this is really, really cool. But there's little extra details in the Milky Way that I want to see and I want to go further. And so you take off that lens and you slap on your 200 or 400 millimeter telephoto lens, and all of a sudden you're going from shooting the Milky Way, now you're shooting nebula, like the Orion Nebula, or if you're doing the Milky Way, right, you're getting like the Lagoon and Trifid Nebula and all of these different regions that are probably unknown to a lot of people just getting into astrophotography. And it's so mind-blowing that you can actually do that.
But, you've got a tripod, a fairly stable tripod. You've got this tracking system. You've got a really nice DSLR with a 400 millimeter lens attached to it. Haven't you just built a telescope with a camera on, with a camera? Like,
shh, you can't give away the secret.
like when do you go, okay, nerd, time to get an actual telescope and do proper astrophotography with a with a camera, right?
Well, that's the next step, right? Is like you got that telephoto lens, and all of a sudden you're like, man, you want more focal length, right? But now you're looking at paying $8,000-$10,000 for these massive lenses, and you realize, oh look, a telescope with the same focal length is like only $1,000.
Yeah. So then you kind of take that sidestep. So where would you cross that line, I guess? When would you decide, okay, it's time to, because then the mount, like again, if you're putting this gigantic lens, as you said, a $10,000 telephoto lens on a DSLR, which is all hanging off the back of a tracking system attached to a consumer tripod, each piece of that system could be a lot more stable and solid if you went with a telescope with a permanent camera attached to it.
Exactly.
When would you say, okay, time to consider going the traditional telescope route?
Well, if you're looking at, like, you want to go deeper, right? Like you're looking at that 600 millimeter lens that you got, and you're like, I don't want to put this $10,000 lens on a $400 tracker mount. Then it's time to upgrade. And the most important part in the telescope industry, we always say this, the most important piece of equipment, there's three things you have to know, right? The first one is your tracking mount, right? Because if you track poorly, then it doesn't matter how expensive your glass or camera is. You're not going to get good results. The second most important thing is going to be your tracking mount. And your third one, I'm sure you can guess, is your tracking mount. That's how important it is, right? It takes the top three spots. So you ditch the tracker, you get yourself a dedicated equatorial tracking mount. And now you can throw on heavy duty equipment. Now, the world is your oyster. I guess that'd be the universe and the night sky. But now you're not limited to 300 or 400 millimeters of focal length. You can get that, 1,000, 1,500, 2,500 and shoot nebula, galaxies, really go deep on the Horsehead Nebula, or shoot like the Sombrero Galaxy and all that awesome stuff.
So, like when people get into astronomy, there are these choke points, these sort of frustration points that tend to dissuade people. They're, I get these emails all the time. People are like, oh, I want to buy a telescope. What should I do? And I'm like, oh, don't buy the
Star Party first.
Yeah. Don't buy the small telescope from the department store. Like, so where, and I love this route of going with the tripod with the tracking system on your DSLR, because you're going to use the tripod and you're going to use a DSLR. At the very worst, you're going to get frustrated with your tracker and sell that on eBay. But like, what is that sort of optimal path that you think people should take in this modern age?
Yeah, this is actually I was thinking about this because I was listening to Dustin and Tony Darnell, right, talking about this, like, what is the path now? And they brought up a great point. We're kind of at this turning point now where astrophotography is becoming so much more popular than visual astronomy because of the shareability with social media, and you can share photos and things like that. And so for people who want to get a telescope, they have to consider, first and foremost, what is it you want to do with it, right? If seeing objects and appreciating the photons hitting your eye is what you want, then you go for the visual telescopes, the Dobsonians and things like that. Yeah. But if you are more interested in doing astrophotography, the best thing to do is to not start with the telescope. Instead, start with the DSLR and the lens and the tripod and go that path of slowly upgrading your pieces so you can go deeper and deeper with more focal length into the night sky.
I think it's important, like, pictures taken this way are showing up on Astronomy Picture of the Day. Like, there are some of the best astrophotographers in the world using this technique with this gear, and through patience and skill are creating absolutely stunning images, especially in wider, like with a telescope, you sort of focus in on the small object, but with a wider field of view, you can put together an aesthetic view of what you're looking at that can be quite stunning.
That's right. And the resolution of these cameras that are coming out now is just insane. I mean, like 50 megapixel, 100 megapixel consumer grade cameras. Now you can shoot wide and just crop in and you still have like a 26 megapixel image.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can bolt your camera, your DSLR onto your telescope if you want to.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing too. And usually like what people, I've seen a lot of people do this and they like have a Dobsonian telescope that, okay, now I want to do astrophotography and they want to attach their DSLR to the Dob. And that becomes very, very difficult because the Dobsonian is not made for astrophotography. Right. And that's why I go back to that same point of like, what is it that you want to do first?
I was that person in college. I had my 6-inch Dob and my Nikon DSLR, and I would made it to the telescope and then I would take pictures and I was doing mostly planetary things, and then you do a bunch of stacking, and at the end you get some super blurry result that probably if you had just started with the right thing. Yeah. And I was out there in Wisconsin, freezing my butt off, holding my thing and like slightly trying to move it while the pictures were being taken, and oh man, it's just like what a bad way to go.
Yeah, Corey Schmitz built a tracking system for his Dobsonian. He was such a beast.
Amazing.
Yeah, like what I mean, of course he doesn't do that anymore. So
that's insane.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our time to do the interview portion. But Ian, if people want to find out more, you're teaching people how to do astrophotography, right?
That's right. So I host workshops, mostly here in California, Southern California, but I'm starting to expand out to places like Arizona and Utah and places like that. And the beautiful thing about the workshops that I do is I actually provide the trackers and the telescopes. So you learn how to do deep space astrophotography. And if you want to learn how to do Milky Way photography as well, we also do that too. So all you really need to do is bring your DSLR camera and any lenses that you have with it and your tripod, right? And I'll take care of the rest. I typically provide room and board and all that stuff. And yeah, it's a great time. Open to beginners, advanced, even if you've just started, shooting with a camera, everyone's welcome to learn how to do this.
All right. Well, if people want to find out more, where should they go?
My website. So it's ianlauerastro.com. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all of that good stuff. Just look up Ian Lauer Astro.
Fantastic. Well, Ian, a pleasure to hang out with you again. Hopefully in person at some point in the future. I'll definitely come down and join you on one of these expeditions.
Awesome.
I'll get my tracking mount. I'm literally going to buy one after tonight because I've got nice dark skies where I live now, so I'm ready to do a lot more astrophotography. Awesome, Ian. Great to see you, and keep looking up.
Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good one and clear skies.
All right. Take care, man.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the space news portion of this week's episode. Morgan, the James Webb incident.
So I don't want to say it's broke, but we don't know that it's not broke. And that's kind of a bad place to be when you're supposed to be launching your $10 billion toy in 3 weeks. And so this all started on Monday with kind of a cryptic post from NASA that said there has been an incident, and gave very, very little detail beyond that. But basically the phase they're in right now is the telescope's done and the rocket's ready, and they basically need to stick those two pieces together.
Yeah.
And so the engineers have been working, the technicians have been working to attach the telescope to the mounting device, essentially, that will then attach it to the rocket. And this is an important piece because it's also the piece that will be responsible for disconnecting the telescope from the rocket once it's in space. And so they were working on this thing, and they were kind of clamping it down as they were doing something. It's all very vague. And one of the clamps released, and the telescope experienced a vibration.
Right.
And it really couldn't be vaguer than it is right now. The good news is, if there is good news here, is that we'll know more very soon, because this is kind of a preview for what I'm sure will be next week's show, which is NASA says that on Friday they will be issuing further statements after they've sort of done an evaluation of what's going on. So they've convened a panel and they're working through the various tests and studying what happened, et cetera. And there's a decent chance, probably a very good chance, that the answer is going to be it's fine.
Right.
The telescope, is about to ride on a rocket, so it's designed to absorb vibrations. What we don't know is whether the vibration it experienced was similar to the kinds that it's been designed for. You can imagine you could make something very sturdy to vibrate in one dimension, and if this torque basically was perpendicular to that, well, the telescope might not be particularly strong in that direction. Right. And there's just no way to know, given what NASA has said publicly, that there's no way to know what happened or what the prognosis is, but we will know in a couple of days. All we know right now is that they've pushed the launch back 4 days,
right,
which are simply the 4 days that they're spending doing this evaluation. And so instead of a nominal launch on the Ariane 5 of December 6th or December 18th, we're now looking at December 22nd.
Right.
And as long as it comes back and says the telescope is fine, it should go forward on that date. There's nothing that's happened that would slow it down if there isn't a problem. It's just we don't yet know publicly whether there's a problem or not.
Like, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, as you said, they were so vague about it, calling it the incident and describing that like something fell off, clanked off, like didn't attach properly and caused the telescope to shake. But like, what could they do? Like, do you pick up the whole telescope and shake it to listen if there's any parts inside that are now have broken and now rattling around? Do you extend the whole? They can't do it there. They can't extend the telescope.
That's the real fear in all of this, is that one of the hundreds of mechanisms needed to unfurl the telescope will be off kilter. And what's scary about James Webb, and it's been like this now for 20 years, is that if a single one of those mechanisms doesn't work, the whole telescope won't unfurl.
Yeah.
And that's like such a risk that they've actually designed the telescope to work in a partially unfurled state, because there ain't no going and fixing it.
Yeah.
And there's all of these sort of single failure points. And so I'm sure that they're running diagnostics on the instruments and the electronics, and that sort of thing we'll be able to know with high certainty is okay. But short of taking it back to the vacuum chamber and sort of opening it up, and that would be a delay of a year or something, yeah, if they had to do that. So I'm glad that I'm not a mission manager on James Webb right now.
Yeah. Yeah, like how do they can't,
we all just sit and wait.
They literally can't test this. Like either they take a year, as you said, and take the whole thing out, move it, take it back to California, open it up in the clean room, make sure everything's working properly, put it all back together, ship it back down to French Guiana.
Yeah.
There's nothing you could do. Like, I don't know, like what examination you could do with a closed up telescope to know that it's not busted.
Everybody in even tangentially connected to the world of astronomy was already terrified of the launch prior to this. And this is just like taking it up to another level. I don't know how you could, like, if you feel good about this, even if they come back and say it's a good clean bill of health, until the thing is actually in space and opened up. Yeah. And that'll be, like months from now. So, we got a lot of sort of knuckle clenching to do between now and then.
Well, I don't think we appreciate just how arduous this launch, how stressful the 29 days after launch are going to be, day after day of actuators opening and pieces of the telescope coming online. as you say, any one of them goes wrong and the whole thing is busted, it's a nightmare. And we're gonna go to bed and we're gonna wake up the next morning and go, is it working today?
Right. The launch will be the most important launch in NASA history since at least Hubble and potentially since Apollo. The amount of energy and money that's riding on this thing working is just sort of indescribable.
Yeah.
And so there's just, even if you were 100% confident, there's just no way to like put that out of your mind. And so, I guess we wait.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about it next week, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then it's going to be the main topic of conversation for the next 3 months or so.
Well, it's good though. I mean, they're checking it out because it's going to be too far away to do anything about it, and it's not like we have to meet Mars or something. So it's still good. The Lagrange point will still be there when it launches.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, you don't have to wait and have it meet up with Mars. The launch window is, whenever you finally are feeling comfortable enough to let that rocket fly.
Unless it's an insurance thing, because I remember hearing about it, insurance launch windows, and got to hit that or it's no longer insured. Now
I think
there's
this thing
no
is
insurance.
Probably self-insured by NASA.
Yeah, there's no insurance on this.
Nobody writing a insurance policy on a $10 million takes 20 years to build thing.
Yeah. If it's gone, it's gone, and NASA just build something different. Oh, all right. Thanks, Morgan. We'll be back with more stories from you, Pam.
Sure.
Now that Ian has taught us to do astrophotography, what should we be looking at in the sky coming up?
And that was fabulous too. A nice, foundation upon which to build. And I like to talk about things you can do. And I have some highlights for the next month or so. Of course, we've got great shows like this one, and I have a show on Fridays, but there's 12 conjunctions, 3 meteor showers, 2 contests going that I know of, and 2 globe at night projects, and a total solar eclipse.
Wow. Well, let's start with the total solar eclipse. So where's that going to be visible from?
From where nobody can see it, pretty much. It is going to be basically over the South Pole, and there's an animation that you can see that will show where it goes. And if you're in the Falkland Islands or the southern tip of Africa, Antarctica, southeasternmost Australia, you might get a kind of a partial, but otherwise we got to look for things online that have cameras in the area, because there's a lot of that now. Even if we can't go there in person, we can see a total solar eclipse on the other side of the world, and this one kind of is. It's basically over the South Pole. So not great exciting. It is happening though, and I know people do chase eclipses. So
when is that happening?
That's on December the 4th. It's also the new moon, so if you're home, go ahead and go outside and try and look at things, because that's a great time to do it when it's the new moon. Full moon, a little bit harder with so much light.
Isn't it a weird coincidence that it's been exactly 2 weeks since we had a lunar eclipse?
We get about 4 to 6 every year. And I haven't really figured out the cycles, but I'm sure there's charts out there that, that have that understanding, and they'll show you where things go. But they do tend to follow.
They cluster. Yeah. So typically, because when you get an eclipse, it's because you're getting the Earth, moon, and the sun all lined up in the same plane.
Right.
And so you'll get a lunar eclipse, and then 2 weeks later, you'll get a solar eclipse. And then sometimes 2 weeks later, you can get another lunar eclipse. So they tend to cluster like that.
That sounds like a great project if you want to take that on. Anybody out there? I like to talk about projects too. And of course, December 18th is the full cold moon. That's what that one's called.
The what moon?
It's a full cold moon.
And is that just a full moon in December?
Yeah, most of the full moons have one or more names, and this one happens to be full cold moon.
How do you feel about that?
I'm okay with it.
Really?
It's kind of
I feel
fun.
cold every time I go out to look at the moon.
Yeah. But what if you're in Australia and it's summertime in Australia and you're being told it's the beaver moon, right? They don't have beavers in Australia. What are they? So
no. They might have a name for it there though, because sometimes it is based on like sort of indigenous populations.
Right. But just this, I mean, I've really seen in the last probably 10 years or so that people use these names for them.
Oh, interesting.
Moon,
they've been around forever from what I can tell.
Well, the names have been around forever. I'm sure you can find in the Farmer's Almanac, but I think that people think that means something.
Oh,
no. It doesn't mean anything.
Just happens to be the name of the moon at that time.
Yeah. It's just a full moon in December is a cold moon, but
they call it the full cold moon. Yes,
but the moon isn't any colder. All right, what else? What else have you got for us in coming up?
Well, we've got some meteor showers. November 25th through the 27th is kind of the peak of the Andromedids, and they're going to be visible after midnight. There's only 5 per hour though. The source is Biela. Then on December 13th into the 14th, this is kind of overnight, and it's the Geminids meteor shower.
That's a big one.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't hear about it as much as like the Leonids and the Perseids, but there are more per hour for the Geminids. They go kind of all night, which is a little bit unusual. Most of them, you want to look after midnight for the most. Yeah. And this one says it sources from Gemini, and they have 75 to 120 per hour, and that is, and I'm going to botch this name, I have a feeling, 3200 Phaethon,
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, people don't realize that the Geminids are the biggest meteor shower of the year currently.
I think they should get a lot more attention.
Yeah,
but than they do.
You're in Southern California, so it's fine. You can sit outside on a December night and enjoy a meteor shower.
True.
Up here, we're definitely hitting freezing most nights now at this point. But I have a plan.
I'm from Northern Ohio. I totally get that.
Yeah, I have a plan, which is I bought an electric blanket at Costco, and so my plan is to like lay outside, but then have the electric blanket over top, and then like another blanket over top of that. And I think I can pull this off because I want to see the Geminids because they are the best meteor shower, but I always skip them because they're in December. And who wants to go and sit outside?
I want to hear about that hack. That'll go into the books, I think, if it's a good hack.
Yeah,
so the next one is
a big long extension cord. Yeah.
There you go. Next one, December 22nd to 23rd. That's the Ursa meteor showers. And that is also after midnight from Ursa Minor, more northerly. 5 to 10 per hour, not as exciting. 8p / Tuttle is the source of that one.
Right on. And you talked about some conjunctions. Give us some good ones. What are the big ones?
I did not write them down this time.
Oh, okay. Well, then never mind.
There's like 12 of them.
Stuff's going to be getting close to other stuff in the sky. Enjoy.
Yes. There are some good ones coming up. I know that. I do have some contests, though, and one is actually about the James Webb Space Telescope. They call it the Unfold the Universe, and the idea is to imagine what the telescope will actually reveal to us. And those submissions are due by December 18th, and I think it's for everybody. I saw pictures of kids and adults. Sometimes it's for kids, but definitely check that out. And
this is from NASA.
Yeah, it's NASA, right? And again, that's December 18th. So look before then. The other one I have is Design Moon Digging Robots, and this is a Lunabotics Junior contest, also from NASA. They are looking for young engineers to help design a new robot concept for excavating, on the moon.
That's cool.
And this is going to be for kids, K through 12 students in the U.S., public, private schools, and homeschools. And if you are an adult, you can still help by being a judge. So I don't have a deadline for that one. It might be on that page. I didn't see it, but the winners are going to be announced March the 29th of 2022.
Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah. And the other thing I have is Globe at Night, which I think is a great project. You go outside, you take a picture, and you report on the picture. And in this case, we have 2 of them, November 25th through December 4th. It's a 10-day span. Northern Hemisphere, you're looking for Perseus. And in the Southern Hemisphere, you're still looking for Grus. Then on the 25th of December into January 3rd, everybody looks at Orion. and Orion is very recognizable. But these are great ways to actually participate and help them formulate the, what's out there, what are people seeing, what can they see,
right. And the purpose here is to like calibrate light pollution, right?
Yes, exactly. And they announced their 2022 dates. I thought that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I have for now.
Okay. I'm getting an echo from somebody. So Pam, I don't know if you did something.
I don't hear an echo.
I hear the echo, so Pam, it's probably coming from you.
So can you maybe mute your microphone, Pam? Okay, awesome. All right, Morgan, we've got one more story from you.
Yeah, let's talk about cool space things hitting other cool space things, because what could be better than that? And I'm talking about the DART mission, which launched this week on a Falcon 9 rocket, and this is a really both a really cool mission, but also a really important mission to sort of understand the potential or lack thereof of using impacts to redirect potentially hazardous asteroids. And so DART is a tiny little spacecraft. I threw a picture up of it inside the Falcon 9 payload bay, and it is little. It weighs only 600 kilograms. And in September of next year, it's going to smash into an asteroid, and we're going to look to see what happens. And the asteroid that it's hitting is also really small. It's called asteroid Didymos, and it's a binary asteroid, which is very common in the asteroid belt, especially among smaller asteroids. And the larger of the two objects is about 800 meters across, and the smaller of the two objects is about 150 meters across. Wow. And so DART's going to hit the smaller one at a speed of about 6,000 meters per second, 6 kilometers per second, and lots of things are going to be watching. And we're looking to see a number of results. Does the asteroid's orbit change around the larger object? What kind of debris is thrown up? What, if anything, happens to the larger of the asteroids? And then, sort of how easy was this? And right. This is kind of an evolution of the Deep Impact mission from 20 years ago. And Deep Impact was a very similar idea. It was entirely looking to see what was inside the asteroid and not really answering questions about redirection, because the asteroid that it struck was really, really much larger. And so there was just no sort of measurable change. This asteroid is quite a bit smaller. And so what we'll be able to understand is how the physics of metal thing hitting rocky thing actually plays out in space. Because as you might know, a lot of asteroids aren't really solid objects. They're what we call rubble piles, these kind of loose agglomerations of rock and dust and dirt and ice and stuff like that. And the physics of that is very different than the physics of hitting a solid object, right? We can all imagine, you play billiards or something, what one hard thing hitting another hard thing does. But what if one hard thing is actually not hard? It sort of fragments. And that could be a real challenge for trying to do a redirection like this if we had to. So of course, Didymos poses no threat to Earth. And in fact, we don't know of any asteroids that do pose a threat to Earth. But this is the kind of asteroid, the size of asteroid that might have been missed in previous surveys. And so this is the kind we're most likely to have a surprise encounter with. And so NASA is hoping to launch a telescope in the next decade to survey for these kinds of small asteroids. Because we've done a pretty good job of mapping everything about 1 kilometer in size and bigger. And those are the kind of like extinction event size asteroids. But there's the really, really bad day size that is kind of between, say, 100 meters and 1 kilometer. And that's exactly in the range of this smaller of the pair of asteroids. And so we'll be able to get a real world test of whether, if we could see 20 years in advance that something like this was coming, could we do anything meaningful to address it? Well, we're going to find out next year.
So is one of the possibilities then that it's still much smaller than the rock that it's hitting, than the asteroid that it's hitting.
Oh, way smaller.
But what we saw with Bennu and with Ryugu is that these things are probably not a ball of rock, but are actually an agglomeration of debris roughly in a pile. And so you could imagine it smashing into it and actually throwing out a bunch of material, or maybe like making the whole thing kind of shake a bit like jelly.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I think everyone would assume that we're going to see a debris cloud. And that's kind of what some of these telescopes are going to be looking for. Unlike Deep Impact, which was kind of a two-part mission, this is a one-shot kind of spacecraft. And so we won't be able to see in situ the effects of the collision in terms of smaller effects. All we're going to be able to see are effects that are big enough to be observed from Earth. And so that'll be any debris cloud that is thrown up and any permanent change in orbital dynamics. But those two things will tell us a lot. And so
totally.
There is a camera on board the collider. And so that will enable us to get a sense of what this thing actually looks like and understand, what did we hit? Did we land in the middle of an impact crater? Did we land on what looks like a rocky ridge? Was this looking like a sand pile? And that information, transmitted kind of at the last second, will provide the context that will be used then to interpret the much broader scale observations that we'll be able to make from Earth.
Now, it's a two-parter though, right? Isn't there like an orbiter that's going as well, or is it just a straight shot?
So I'm pretty sure it's a straight shot, one piece.
Okay. Okay.
And no chance it'll direct it to us, is there?
No, I think
no.
Oh, good.
we know that whatever impact it has will be minuscule. The question is how minuscule, and lots of predictions have been done about what will happen, and like how good were those predictions? Because it's one thing if we prove that, hey, we can do this. It's another thing if we prove we can do this, but we have no idea what the end result is. Right, that makes it a lot less useful. If the dynamics are such that it's not so easy to understand, because whatever the change is going to be small. And so you need to sort of make maximal effect with that small change. And we'll find out how sort of chaotic the process is versus something that's kind of deterministic.
Yeah. And so the hope is that when we find an asteroid with our name on it, we now know how much energy it takes to shift the orbit of an asteroid, and we can create a larger impactor as long as we have enough time. So we have 10 years, 20 years, we could throw a really big impactor into an asteroid that would shift it from a future collision to a near miss 10 years down the road.
Right. And when you're talking,
do we have a meeting point, the time at which they're going to meet? Do we know?
Yes, they'll meet in September of next year.
Okay.
The exact date will depend on the sort of orbital dynamics of as it approaches. Okay. But we know it'll be September. And you can imagine something that's 140 meters, that's not big. Mm-hmm. Right? We make bigger craters on Earth when we, fight in wars and things. And so that's the scale where it's actually plausible to sort of do something about it.
Yeah.
When you're talking about like a 10-kilometer sized impactor, it's like there's nothing to do in that scale. Fortunately, we know all of the 10-kilometer sized objects out there, we think. But there's hope on these smaller ones. And as we found with James Webb, hope is a good thing.
Terrific. All right. Well, we've reached the end of our hour. So, Morgan, you were just talking. Tell us what you're working on and where people can find out more.
Yeah, so I've been writing some pieces for EOS magazine, and you can check those out at eos.org. And of course, come by the museum. We've got some cool things going on, and come check us out. We're open on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays in Fort Worth, Texas.
So great. Pam.
Cool. That sounds great. So the big thing for us is the Friday night shows, and we have some interesting guests coming up. Of course, you can see us on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific time on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. We have Shane and Chris on Friday, and they are from the Actual Astronomy podcast. That's Friday the 26th. They're going to talk about getting started with visual astronomy. They're actually in Canada too, so that's
Awesome.
pretty cool. Yeah, and we've got Pamela Gay. We've been talking about December 3rd, so we got to finalize that. And Josh Carlson is coming back. She says yes. Josh Carlson is coming back on Friday, January 21st. He's the author of Space Power Ascendant. He will be talking about the second space race that's currently ongoing between the USA and kind of versus China and Russia.
Right on.
Really excited about that. Yeah.
All right. We've reached the end of our hour. I'm Universe Today, all the things. We've got a million stories, so come check out Universe Today. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. Thanks for a special guest. Thanks to my co-hosts. Thanks to Pamela for engineering everything behind the scenes. Thanks to Nancy and the rest of the administrators and everyone behind the scenes at the Weekly Space Hangout crew for their help every week. Thanks, everyone, on both YouTube and Twitch. And we will see all of you next week. Thanks, everyone. And Morgan will be back. So that'll be great.
Happy Thanksgiving if you're in the USA.
All right. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.